Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for OPE. Let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for OPE. You know who wanna go, gonna glow.
Aloha and welcome back to the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Today's pre-draft episode, we're previewing the linebacker position, and we have Jason Perone from almost anything Packers related. Jason, I have but one question for you. How's the weather? I know you guys don't do that as much anymore, but I always have to ask when we have you on. How's the weather?
Thank you. No, a PackADay podcast, and actually, Mark Eckel and I do the Thursday edition of the PackADay podcast, and we have kind of brought the weather back
Nice.
this year. So we started doing it again, and we've been getting more interaction from some of our fans, some of which are overseas. So it's really cool to get the weather. We've gotten our regulars from Europe. We got some from Australia. So right now it's actually kind of eventful here I'm in the Phoenix area. So it's warm. It was a high of 76 today, and it's going to be it's all over the place. It drops down to 60 tomorrow, up to 75 Wednesday, but then on Friday, rain and 58 degrees. So we're all over the place, and then it climbs back into the 70s. I don't know. Mother Nature, she do what she do, but the sun shines out here. We talk about 330 days of sunshine in Phoenix, so I'm not going to complain. Winter is going well. It's going well. Thanks, guys, for having me on. It's good to be back.
Mike, we are not going to start the weather stuff with us because you're in paradise and I'm in hell.
But it's okay because Joe is still with us, so he's alive and well. As I said, this week we have linebackers. Just to kind of recap where the Packers are this season. So the big dominoes they have falling this offseason. Quay Walker is going into his fourth season, but as a first-round pick, that means that his fifth-round option is due. I think it's the first week of July or something. The decision is somewhere in June or July. You have two guys coming off rookie seasons that were in very opposite directions in Edge Cooper and Hopper. And then potentially on their way out are, excuse me. Oh my God, I'm having a massive brain fart. Joe, who are
Eric Wilson and Isaiah McDuffie.
Thank you. So two guys who were, either spot starters, chair holders, however you want to view it. They're guys who were big special teams contributors, but guys not to put it, marginally or anything, but guys you wanted to see have their starting spot replaced. So we're going to get this one right this week. First off, Perone, your thoughts on re-sign them or let them go for our two McDuffie and Wilson this offseason?
I'm a big staunch supporter of Eric Wilson. I think his versatility, the special teams thing is important. And when he's had to play, he's been effective in the middle more so. I think he offers a little more than McDuffie. He just, he's a more well-rounded player. I like them both. And I don't know how much the Boston College connection with Jeff Hafley plays a difference with McDuffie. I think McDuffie is he's kind of almost like a slightly better. Speaking of brain farts, why am I blanking now? Our guy we had in the middle for Blake Martinez. Yes, Blake Martinez. Gosh, he's been gone for that long. That's why I forgot who he was. So he's kind of like a Blake Martinez. He's able to fill in, but obviously you can tell there's a deficit in speed when he's out there. So I would say Wilson over McDuffie if it's an either-or situation. I wouldn't imagine keeping both would be very expensive, but again, I guess that depends also on how the Packers see the position and if they want to focus on it in the draft or look at some of these free agents that are coming.
Yeah, so I'm just going to throw a few names out there. A lot of these guys are guys that you're, if you're quoting Major League, wish we had him 5 years ago. And don't worry, none of them are going to fall into the we did.
But I was thinking the same thing, that I was going through the list and I was like, man, that's a name I wish we had 4 years ago. That's a name I wish we had 4 years ago.
About the only guy on this list, and ironically, he's the oldest by a few years, but Levante David, Dre Greenlaw, Jerome Baker, Isaiah Simmons, Kazir White, and then there's going to be a bunch of names that sickos like me would know, but I'm not sure many other people would know. But Joe, Jason, any of those names sound like guys that, I don't see this as a position Goot's going to break the bank on. I think that's on either corner or some sort of pass rusher. But any of those guys you think could be brought in for like kind of the same role that McDuffie and Wilson covered this past season?
I don't know. It'd be a late free agent thing if they did. I mean, there was some. I think Andy did a preview. Andy Herman did a preview on PackADay about Levante David being an older veteran option, but the Packers want youth and speed, and these guys obviously they're kind of past that point in their career. Bobby Wagner's another one too with Washington. He's out there too. Zach Bond is listed, but the Eagles are bringing him back. I mean, they don't have a Super Bowl if he doesn't didn't play with them this past year, and he was a huge get for them too. I don't know if you mentioned Nick Bolton too. I think you did. So I again, this is just tea leaves, and look at what they've done in the past, and Inside Backer just hasn't been a big place where they've spent a lot of money. So it's going to end up being one of those things where it gets like late into free agency, a guy hasn't signed and he's willing to talk to other teams and maybe becomes an option. But I think the Packers want youth and speed. They hit, Goody's probably feeling himself a little bit after hitting the mother load with Edrin Cooper. And he'll probably try to dip back into that, because you got edge in the second round. Now, I wouldn't flirt with disaster again and not hope a guy drops that doesn't, if you want a really, really impact player. But I think he'll probably try to take another stab at it with youth. And you do still have Quay Walker for this one more season. I assume you guys agree with too, obviously, them not picking up that 5th-year option.
Yeah, as much as the two of us are to different degrees Quay defenders, that 5th-year option, it's so it's tough. You've got to be an impact player to pick that up. I'd say it's more likely they extend him, they sign him to some kind of extension, which there's been some light reports to. I'd say they do that well before they pick up the option. So, and somewhere in there, you let him play the year out and you potentially tag him to extend him next year kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think Goody said that during his the press conference before the combine or whatever, that they were kind of talking about an extension, wanting to keep Quay here for an extended period of time. So I do wonder, like Mike said, if they would do a Jordan Love-esque type deal instead of picking up the 5th-year option, then maybe give him a 2-year deal or 3-year deal or whatever, and say, all right, this is your time. This is your make or break. If you don't do it at this point, you're done. We're not going to bring you back, whatever. Or if you live up to the potential that we're hoping you do, then we'll talk about an extra long extension for you. But yeah, like Mike said, we've kind of been Quay defenders. I don't think he's been as horrible as a lot of Packers fans think he has. I think he's done well with what he's dealt with. I mean, it doesn't help getting injured a couple different times this year. And, when he started to come into his own, he would end up getting kind of like Devontae Wyatt did. They'd come into their own, they'd get a little bit injured, and then they'd have to work back from that. They'd come into their own, get a little bit injured, and then they have to work back from it. So I do think that they need to maybe take the green dot off of him, because I think maybe that is harming him more than helping him, because I don't think he is a guy that can, not that he can't, I shouldn't say can. I don't think I don't think he can process pushing out the play on top of trying to figure out what he's going to do. So if they can just limit his job to say, all right, kind of like they did with Edge Cooper this past season, read and react. Your gap is that gap. You're going to make a play on that gap. If this guy comes out, then you can do on that. So maybe give the dot to Xavier McKinney or somebody like that to say, all right, you're going to make the play calls, you're going to make the decisions. Quay is just going to do his job at that point. Now, as for guys that potentially come in to maybe replace McDuffie and Wilson, I'm going to put 2 names out there, but I know I'm going to get ripped for bias. And that's going to be the Neiman brothers, either Ben or Nick. Both of them have the ability to be a role type player and also be that special teams type guy. I don't think they're going to be able to take a full-time starting position, but at this moment you don't need a full-time starter per se, but they can both be that rotational type guy, fill in when need be, and then be that special teams ace. Or hell, bring Christian Welch back. I mean, he was both me and friggin' Kawano both could not understand why, with the way they were playing during the preseason, why they weren't able to fit Welch onto the team at that point. But, it is what it is. Another name that I noticed on here while I was going through it was the kid from Seattle, Ernest
Oh,
Jones.
Jones.
I think he could. I think he could be a guy if he makes it into free agency. And then I also thought of this one because I saw his name out there, and that would be old friend Chris Barnes. I wonder if he could be that guy that could rotate it. And he's still young enough. I think he's only 26, maybe going on 27. So, he's not going to be doing much when it comes to coverage, but he can give you that downhill stuff that a McDuffie can do. So, and then on top of that, McDuffie and Wilson, I'm on the fence on that. I think I could go either way. If they bring him back, yeah, great, whatever. It's not going to hurt me anything. If they don't bring him back, okay, whatever. But if those are the only things that they do at the position this year, then I might be a little bit more upset about it than anything. So I think, like Perone said, that they're going to reach into it during the draft, whether it's, a mid-round, late-round guy, or, who knows? It could be the first-round pick all over again.
We got to try to save. We got to save Chris Barnes from the Arizona Cardinals because, anybody that's stuck out here, just help him out. Help him out. We got to save. We got to save Barnesy. He played a lot in that game. I think he started against the Packers. Didn't he play most of that game? Yeah. He had to jump in there because they had injuries.
I think they were down like 2 or 3 linebackers, and then another one got hurt during the game. And I was joking in our recap that Love goes out to like throw a block, and I was like, I swear to God, he doesn't do that if he doesn't see 5-1 on his jersey, because he's like, my best buddy's not blowing me up in the middle of the play kind of thing.
And that would be another reason to bring him back in, is because him and Love are like best friends. So if they would do it for Rodgers, why aren't they going to do it for Love?
Already, let's get him emboldened. Let's accelerate the emboldenment program here, and let's not wait till year 6 or 7.
And it's not like he's bringing in the old friend, Like I said, Barnes is still only 26, 27 years old, so he's got a few years left on him.
Yeah. Old in terms of how long they've known each other, not age. But as you both have kind of pointed at, and this is a position that we hope they do address at some point in this draft. So we'll start to key in on that direction. Luckily, the linebackers just participated by the time you're listening to this, I guess a few days ago. But when we're recording this on Sunday, Linebacker Day was yesterday or the day before. I think it was 2 days before. But it's good to see, some of the drills on the field and stuff. But Jason, any of those names that stick out to you in that day 1, day 2 window that, could entice Groot to dip it back into that pool of off-ball linebackers again?
Well, I have a couple here, and I think linebacker it's one of those sneaky positions in a lot of NFL defenses, because when you have really, really good defense and good linebackers in the middle, you can do so much more elsewhere within the framework of what you do. And I look at, if you think back to like the days of Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, Devin White, Levante David, we mentioned David, Urlacher and Briggs. Last year, Zach Bond was everywhere for the Eagles, and they got him for a song. I think it is an important position. It's one the Packers haven't put a lot of emphasis on it until they did last year. They struck gold with Edge Cooper, and I think, get greedy, Brian Gutekunst. Now, my question is to you guys, and maybe Mike, because I know that you kind of preview and you do some of this stuff here too. So Jahad Campbell projects as more of an edge, but he also is listed as an inside linebacker. So where do we think he's going to fall? Because obviously I think he could be kind of like the golden egg of the draft, but that depends on where everybody sees him fitting.
Yeah, so in an ideal world, where I would have Jihad Campbell going is more day two ish kind of thing because, like you said, he's not a pure off ball linebacker. But the way I would use him is like almost a like a Parsons light kind of thing, where it's like he's your Sam linebacker on rundowns, and then you know use him as an edge rusher or like spot blitzer here and there kind of thing, and you just it just adds another element to your defense that you didn't really have last year. You know that was the thing is like you had you know because Cooper was being both brought along he was being brought along slowly both because he's a rookie and because he was injured for like training camp, so like there was a learning curve that he was behind for almost all of the season. So you at some point we're like there's one or two linebackers on the field that you're like we don't want in coverage. And so whereas going into this year hypothetically you're going to have both Quay and Edge on the field for 90% plus of all your snaps. And then, you bring in Jihad, let's say, to be your Sam linebacker. And having, like you said, Jason, just being that much more athletic in your linebacking core, it allows you to be so much more versatile where it's not like in the since the Super Bowl, since the Packers won the Super Bowl, it's like, well, the opponent is in some sort of receiver heavy group, we're going to a sub package kind of thing. But one of the things that like the Bowman, Patrick Willis 49ers did is like those two guys were so athletic that they could play base against like three receiver packages and stuff. And not saying you want to live in that environment, but especially against like hurry up offenses or just to kind of disguise what you're doing, it just makes your defense a little more multiple if you have three guys at the second level of your defense who are athletic enough to pull off coverage assignments, but also like affect the pass game as blitzers and whatnot. So that's where I would have him in that early day two window where I'd be like, yeah, like if you got him kind of where you got Edge last year, I'd be really excited about that from Campbell.
I know I'll sound like a West Coast homer, but what about UCLA, Carson Schwessinger from UCLA?
So that's a guy that he's kind of like Quay in a way where he hasn't been playing linebacker very long. I forget if he was like
he only started one season.
Yeah, and I think it's because like he's one of those guys where it's like he came out of high school as like a tight end or a quarterback or something like that, and UCLA it took them a couple seasons to like really find his position and stuff. But I mean, the testing showed it. It does pop on film when you watch him. Like he does move really easy out there, and he does feel like a good pick. And it's like this, relatively uber athlete who doesn't have a lot of flight time at the position, but when you pop the film on, you see him run around out there, and you're like, "Dang, that would be nice to have that in your linebacker room." So either one of those guys, Schlesinger is a little more able to play in reverse than Campbell, but also like just the different versatility those two guys would give you around Quay and Cooper would be really nice to add to the defense.
Now, in my opinion, I really don't know anything about Campbell. I didn't really watch him too much, but I do agree with Schlesinger. I really liked what I saw off of him. He's got decent speed to him. He his coverage, like Mike said, his coverage looked okay, but he did have his moments where it's like, okay, what am I doing? What am I doing? But I thought had a good change of direction. He was a solid tackler, and I thought he was a read and react guy. Well, I think he could be that every down linebacker to fit with an Edge and Quay out there. Uh, Campbell, it sounds like more of a Micah Parsons type deal where you're mainly going to want him just headlong into the line to go after the quarterback. So if I had to take my chance on either one of them, I would probably go with the kid from UCLA more than I would Campbell.
But yeah, so it really just comes down to what what they're looking for out of that third linebacker spot. Because, like I said, you've got hypothetically your two guys who can be your rangy coverage athletes. So do you look for another guy who can overlap with that? Especially if there's a high probability that Edge is still going to be blitzed a decent chunk out of his time that he's on the field, because you want to use that explosive athleticism to attack the quarterback. So do you get a guy who has a little bit more coverage chops, or do you go with, a guy who's more of a rusher who will, just be attacking the line of scrimmage more? And that's kind of what your Sam linebacker is anyway. It's, he's a overhang defender who's going to kind of help hem in the run and stuff, and then also get to the quarterback. So I, I guess it's hard to say because this is a part of his defense where Hafley was sort of hemmed in terms of what he had in his back pocket for the position. So we can't really say, last year was totally what he wants to do because we never saw what he could or wanted to do with three like really athletic players on the field. He was always kind of behind the eight ball there, whether it's because of the preseason injuries Hopper and Cooper, were dealing with or whatever. So it's hard to give a full answer because we just that's part of the unknown. I feel like we got to see like 60%, 70% of the iceberg of Hafley's defense this year, but linebacker is definitely one where it's like, oh, like, because as Joe kind of pointed out earlier, it took Edge about half the season to where they're like, we're pretty comfortable he knows most of what he's doing most of the time. And then Quay took off at that point, and then he got hurt in Seattle. And then it was like, it's Cooper's got to do everything at linebacker because McDuffie and Wilson are, they're kind of traffic cones in coverage as opposed to being like effective players. So I am curious to see what that's going to look like this year.
That's the other question too. Is can Goody resist the temptation to helmet scout and just look at Georgia's roster? Now you have Smael Mondan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Now, I think the knock on him is I don't think his frame will allow for much more growth. So I think he projects as Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's a day 3 guy, special teamer, more than anything.
Yeah, I think so. The fact that he's got into the combine at like 224, I think that kind of speaks to where he's at.
It's a little bit smallish. So, but then I guess the question is this just doesn't seem like a position that Goot's going to take a couple stabs at. Like he's loaded up. And I think this year, if he's going to load up, linebacker is probably not going to be where it's going to be. It'll end up being at cornerback, which is obviously a huge need, or it could even be at receiver. I have no idea, but an edge. I mean, they need edge players. Preston Smith is gone, although he is back out there. I'm sure he's not coming back to Green Bay. So, but that was another one that I saw there too. Was just there's certain schools that keep popping. And so there's a Georgia player that's there that's got some temptation written all over it for Goody, but we'll see what he does.
Yeah, it's just interesting too because before we were playing a defense that aligned more with what Georgia was doing in terms of it was like a 3-4 base with some of the same sub package tendencies, and now that we're moving to Hafley's 4-3, I'm curious. Yeah, you don't system scout and all that kind of stuff, but you could kind of extrapolate where the fits would be and stuff. So I'm kind of curious to see how that pulls in as well. But I agree with you. That's why I do have off-ball linebacker as like a sneaky day 2 pick where if one of the top names kind of slips into, like I said, that edge range, you could see Groot taking it because I agree with you, Perone, that this isn't a position that's going to get multiple picks this season unless it's like a late day 3 guy that's just like you're taking like a Sam Shields equivalent where it's just like it's not a perfect player but he's a 10 Raz and you're just gonna see if you can teach him the football kind of thing. But otherwise you invested 2 day 2 picks in the position last year. You didn't get to see one of them play basically at all in any game that mattered. So I agree with you that like you're gonna see a guy who can push Hopper for a spot and potentially be there in case Quay isn't back in 2026. But otherwise, it's more of like a medium-ish range, medium range in terms of like projection of when you expect that guy to play, as opposed to like we need a guy that's gonna definitely play now. It's somewhere. Obviously, if he can play now, that's awesome. But it's more like a just in case Hopper can't do it, and if Quay isn't, if the majority of what we've seen from Quay is the guy, not the guy from the last like few games before we got hurt. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they attack it come this draft.
Well, I will say this. Depending on what the Packers do in the draft when it comes to inside linebacker, will show what they're planning to do with Quay. So if they take one early, then you've got to believe Quay is only playing one more season with the Packers, and then he's on his way out, unless he takes like a really team-friendly contract or something. And then on top of that, the certain type of player that they take will also show if Quay is sticking around or not. Because if they're going to take a guy that has similar traits to what Quay has, but he's got a higher floor than what Quay did, and can produce better, more like an Edge Cooper than Quay, then that also shows that that they're not too much more with Quay on the roster than they are. So I think and I think that's what they're going to be looking for, is somebody that could do what Quay does, but depending on if they take it early or late is going to show if whether or not they're going to keep Quay around.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and a lot of questions still to be answered. Unfortunately, his health didn't give us the clarity that we wanted to see with him in the new defense. I think we all hoped that he was going to blossom and flourish in this, and maybe if they kind of like you said, took some of that responsibility away. I don't want to make it sound like he can't handle the green dot, but it's extra things. It's other things that some players just need to be turned loose and go and get after it. So as it always does, the draft will tell us kind of what the Packers think about certain players. I just think I don't know. I feel like this is probably a late day two, definitely more of a day three type of a thing. And if you want to go full homer, and I think he's pretty far down the list here too. So I'm only doing this for you, Joe. But Jay Higgins out of Iowa is your classic lunch pail linebacker, special teamer. Like Mike said, take a flyer guy. So before we got out and didn't mention any Iowa boys, I wanted to make sure to give some love to your locale.
Well, there's actually two of them. There's Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins, and I think both of them would. It really sucks what's going on with Jay Higgins right now, because he's falling into the typical Iowa trap, where all through the season they're talked about as this high, top of the round, top of the draft type of guy, and then they go in and test, and all of a sudden they just fall flat everywhere. And it doesn't help that, and I got it pulled up here because I was looking at the combine results. He was dead last in every linebacker that ran the 40 with the 4.82. And that just, I don't know if it's because they don't train him to for the underwear Olympics, as we like to call them, because he doesn't look like he's a 4.82 out on the field. He looks like he's that fast, quick read type of backer. He also weighed in a lot lighter than what I expected him to come in at. He was only like 225 or something like that, 224. And that one was really surprising. But, maybe it's a Micah Hyde type thing where he falls into the perfect spot. The Packers just say, all right, well, we're going to try it. And he just, blue collars it and makes it, works his way up to a role. I'm hoping the best for him, because again, when he's out on the field, he does not look like he's I don't know what they gave him for a Raz, but it's like a 2.89 or something, because he really tested poorly. And I'm just really hoping that it was a bad day for him, and maybe at the pro day or something, all his numbers will climb back up. And then Nick Jackson is another one. He unfortunately did not get to test at the combine. I don't know if he just wasn't invited, or if he just didn't want to do it. But he's in the similar ilk as Jay Higgins, that he just seemed to be everywhere that the Packers, that the Hawkeyes needed him to be. And he's a transfer from Virginia. And I would be, obviously as the Iowa guy, I would be happy for either one of them. But I really feel bad for Jay, just because of going into the combine, he was talked about as a high draft pick, and now he's looking at maybe not even going drafted because of the numbers he put up.
Yeah, it's just a bummer of this process, because it's like that's it's really unfortunate, especially at a position like linebacker where like the league is transitioning to being, or however you want to, it has transitioned or it's transitioning still into being more like a wide open game, that quote unquote basketball on grass and stuff. And, we've been talking up about how we want Green Bay to be more athletic on the second level. And I feel like most of the league, looks at, like Perone mentioned, Zach Bond made himself a lot of money playing for the Eagles. And what is he? He's an athletic freak who, out of college, it was like, oh, he was an edge. Can he play inside linebacker? And it's taken him a couple teams kind of thing. But, he's a supreme athlete. And that's how, he just affects the game from his position is that he's able to run around and make plays all over the place. And yeah, it's so hard to tell because I don't know what scouts look for. Do they care about the times, or do they prefer what's on film? Because, like you said, Joe, um, linebacker is one of those positions where it's like that film speed, unless it's like you run something that's close to 5 seconds in the 40. I feel like the film speed is what usually holds over, but we'll just have to see. And the Packers have taken guys that haven't run that well at linebacker. One of them being another former Hawkeye and Abdul Hodge back in the day, and I thought he had a good start to his career as a Packer, and then unfortunately both his knees exploded on him, and but
He had knee problems coming out of college.
yeah,
He
and I
had
know that was one of the reasons that he fell down to where we got him in like the fifth or sixth round. But I remember he started for Barnett that year when Barnett, he first broke his hand in
he was
the
a third
'06 season,
rounder.
and I was like, dang, like he actually looked like he belonged on the field with the rest of the defense there. So there, it's one of those positions where obviously athleticism is like touted and preferred if possible, but you got to be able to run and produce at whatever size you play at. So really curious to see, yeah, where he ends up going in the draft because he is a fun player to watch.
He is, and he's probably similar in a lot of ways to Abdul Hodge. Hodge was a third rounder for the Packers, but had his knees not been shoddy, he could have been a guy that was drafted similar to Chad Greenway the same year because they were the two main guys out of the Hawkeyes that season. But I think he had knee problems similar to who was the UCLA kid, Jack, Miles Jack, where it was like and this was early on where they didn't quite have the grasp on things. So unfortunately, that's the way it. And who knows? Maybe Jay's dealing with some kind of injury too, and that's why he tested poorly on a lot of things. But if you go through the combine, the poor guy, and and I wanted to look this up real quick. I think it was the 3 cone.
He had a
The only
good three
thing that
cone.
may Yes, I was just gonna say the only thing that I can say that may help him and show that maybe he just struggled with the 40 was he had the best 3 cone out of all of them tested. So that usually 3 cone means that they have a decent amount of burst and a decent amount of agility. So maybe he just struggled with running. I watched the tape on him running, and he didn't look comfortable doing it. And he honestly, I hate to say it, but he looks like I could have outran him. And I'm 38 years old with 2 bad knees and a bad back, and there's no way I should be outrunning anybody.
But yeah, so it's tough, and like I said, it's tough because it's a position where there's no, there isn't like an Edge Cooper this year where it's like someone who you're kind of like, yeah, that looks like if everything hits, he's a first round pick value kind of thing and stuff. This it's a weird position to talk about because you don't have those guys that are like upper echelon, surefire first round picks. You've got guys that are like, Campbell, Schlesinger. Campbell's more the like, if he's your flavor of ice cream kind of thing, you could squint your eyes and see a first round pick. And Schlesinger is that like lacks a long career at the position, but is just a supreme athlete and tested like one. But it's like, are you gonna bet on that ceiling when the floor is relatively low? So you don't have those first round picks that you're like, yeah, that's a guy that you're gonna take use that premium pick on to get that And as Perone mentioned, like, I don't see this as being the position where Goot's like, that is going to be the guy who's going to come in and make a day one impact that's going to elevate the defense, because um, they have the two guys that they want playing 90, 95+% of the snaps already on roster. So it remains to be seen. But any other guys that kind of caught your eye, or
I have one that I
okay,
think if I had to put a round grade on him, it would be an early round pick. But of course, like I say, like I always tell everybody, I don't do round grades because I'm always wrong on them. But it's the kid out of Oklahoma. Let me get his name here real quick.
Stutzman, Danny Stutzman.
Yeah, Danny Stutzman. He was quick. He had good speed to him. Good gap play. Good awareness. He was a sideline to sideline type guy, and according to the combine stats, he had it to back it up. And I think the other thing that really popped out for me with him was he looked like an old school type linebacker, and not just in the way he played, but he also had the neck roll, and I love seeing the return of the neck roll. And he really looked like that type of linebacker that if you were putting on tape from the 70s or 80s, that was the type of guy you were getting, but with an athletic freak type deal to him. And if I were to take a swing on the guy, and this is no disrespect to my Iowa guys, because I would take them in a heartbeat. I'd have a full draft about nothing but Iowa guys, but I would probably take Stutzman in a heartbeat just because he really flashed for me when I was watching him.
Yeah, he's trying to look at. I mean, obviously, good school. I think
Yeah.
I think the big knock on him too is that he gets lost in the wash a little bit.
Yeah, he can.
He's more of an absorb the contact versus deliver, but you know some of that stuff can, and I don't know, at linebacker it almost seems like, you know, there are certain things you can coach, other things are just inherently in you. I don't know if that's something that's coachable. You know, if all of a sudden you become more of a thumper, that could have also been a matter of what he was asked to do in his you know, in the scheme that he played in there.
yeah, those are always
The
the,
sad thing is I was seeing that happen way too much with the linebackers that I was watching, that they weren't like playing the line very well. They would just go in and throw their shoulder into a blocker and try to wipe out the line. So I think I watched like 10, 11 guys, and I only made notes on half of them because I was like, all he's doing is just trying to go in and take out a lineman, and he's not really making a play on anything, and he's not really, you know, doing anything other than running shoulder first into a lineman. So I'm wondering if that's the new quote unquote new school way of teaching their linebackers, because I was seeing it constantly.
I think it's sort of a function of the fact that, you know, the college game is so spread in this era that you're either playing like four safeties or you're playing linebackers who are like in the mid 220s to the mid low 230s kind of thing. And it's a simple matter of like physics where it's not a two, you know, your Mike isn't a 250 guy anymore, you know, in which was like the hallmark of college and NFL play, where it's like you had to have that big sturdy inside linebacker who would like direct your defense and control the run between the tackles, and was almost like a extra edge defender in the way he had, you know, he stone blockers and stuff. And nowadays it's all about being able to run in coverage, and it's like, okay, you got to either sidestep that blocker or you just have to like kamikaze yourself into him to kind of just screw up the blocking timing and stuff. So it's hard to say, but also because like kind of Perone said, it's hard to say whether it's what they're coached to do, but you every once in a while you do see guys that maintain proper technique, keep the correct arm free, and, you know, hedge a block the right way and stuff like that. So yeah, I that's the leap to where the guys who are paid to be scouts and are paid to be general managers, those are the ones who, you know, they know the coaches, they know the schemes, they understand what a guy can or can't learn. And that, you know, that's why guys like Goot, Howie Roseman, that's why they're paid the big bucks to be the people who make these kind of decisions, is because, you know, we're, you know, the three of us, a lot of people making these pre-draft shows, we're fans and we're trying to like do our pre-draft scouting, you know, but relatively behind the eight ball to what these NFL team scouting departments are doing, where it's their 365-day job to just do nothing but watch college players, and we don't
And they can
have
go to
all the connection.
practice and they can
Yeah,
talk to the
exactly.
coaches and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Whereas if we tried to show up to a school and talk to the coaches, we'd probably get escorted out by security or something.
Especially me with the gray beard.
Yeah. we got to send Joe in all of his Iowa stuff and just be like, hey,
Or
I've got my student
I
ID.
am a security guard. I
Yeah.
just gotta, get in my security uniform and I'll pretend to be the security guard for practice.
Well, if we want to have some fun with names here, there's a couple names. I don't know about players as far as where they're going to get drafted or if they're going to get drafted too, but you have a Chris Paul that's in this draft out of Ole Miss, Chris Paul Jr. Now, he ran a 4.63. But when I watched him, he's one of those players that when they talk about the difference between quickness and speed, he actually plays fast or plays quick. So he could end up being an okay player. I don't know where he's projected, Mike. I think he's probably another day 3 guy.
Early day 3, it's because he's one of those guys where I'm like, he better run fast because he's only like 220, and you hear Mike Wall talk about it all the time. It's funny because I don't think Wall is necessarily a Quay Walker defender, but he's still some like old school to his mentality and stuff because he's like, I see all these people talking about put Edge Cooper at middle linebacker. You can't have a 200.
Uh-oh.
The freeze.
And it always freezes at the right spot. Look at that face.
Beautiful. I should screen grab that. He looks like he's puckering up. So if anyone ever needs some love from Mike. But another one I was going to say, and I'll wait for him to come back because I don't want him to miss this this fun, because I have a question for you guys when he does return, and it does kind of correlate to the position, but that's the Packers are probably one of those teams too where the size of the player for a draftee. Now, if for free agents and guys that have been in the NFL and proven to be productive, Goody will overlook his size chart and he'll break the mold and say, okay, we'll bring this player in. But when you look at the measurables, 220 for a linebacker in the Packers system, just to me is almost like a non-starter, probably.
The only thing that I've been saying lately or discussing lately with a lot of people is with the switch to 4-3, do some of those thresholds maybe stretch a little bit? So like the normal thresholds for like an edge defender for the Packers in the past off of 3-4 was usually around 265 to 280. Well, that's a little bit heavy for a 4-3 rush in. So, do they consider a guy that's maybe 250, around that area? So with the linebacker core, there for the longest time, like AJ Hawk, Nick Burnett, they were like Mike, we're talking about the 250-ish guys. Now, do they maybe bump that down with this being a 4-3 and needing a little bit more speed? And that, do they bump it down a little bit and say, all right, well, maybe not 220, but we're going to go down to maybe 235-ish and grab a guy around there and see how he does, or 230 maybe the bottom line for them. But we've also seen in the past where if everything else fits in their mold, that they'll grab him. Like Jair was just like a hair under what their normal height was, but he had the arm length, he had the weight, he had all the other aspects of his game that they looked for. So they were able to bypass a little bit of that. What's the other one? I think Quay was even a little bit underweight compared to what they normally went for inside linebackers. So, but he fit everything else in their threshold mold. But I really do think that this could be the year that and the other reason that I say that is if you look at the guys coming out of college, there's not a lot of them that are fitting the old Packers thresholds anymore.
Sure.
The college guys are getting smaller and faster and stronger and stuff like that. So trying to find somebody that fits the old school, mold of what they're looking for is getting harder and harder for them to do, to the point that, are you going to use a first round on a guy that you would take in past years, but maybe only a third rounder now because there's so many other guys that are in a different size mold than what they would consider.
Yeah, I mean, asking a guy to take on a tackle or split a tackle on a guard and get to the quarterback versus having to chase down a running back on the edge or to the corner, totally different size profiles and skill
Right.
set profiles. And you need, obviously, if you can find a guy that's 280 and can do that, that's run the card up to the podium. I mean, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. But to your point, yeah, they're gonna have to break mold a little bit and find guys that are a little bit smaller. But I think that's probably an ongoing conversation. And I trust in the scouting department and Brian Gutekunst and what he's done. I know there's been a lot of debate about how successful he's actually been. People love to, some people love to talk about his misses all the time, and they just ignore the fact that he found Jair Alexander, for example. And I don't think Jair was some
Yeah.
consensus pick back then. Everybody wanted Derwin James. All the Packers fans wanted Derwin James back then, and they picked Jair Alexander, and he actually ended up being pretty good. If he hadn't gotten hurt, he'd probably still be a Packer for a couple more years to come. You've got Rashawn Gary that panned out really well. Jordan Love is their quarterback right now. So, I mean, he's made some really good picks. So I trust that he is aware of the shift in the mentality of the player, the type of players that this defense needs. And if nothing else, you look and see what Edge Cooper did, and then maybe you create a mold or kind of a process around a player like that. And obviously those guys don't grow on trees, but you create a process
Right.
around that kind of profile, testing numbers, or like, hey, I saw this in Edge. Let's see what this other kid can do. And you bring him in, give him a chance to flourish in the defense, and let Hafley work with them. And this year is going to be, it's going to be big for this defense because it's like the training wheels are off. It's year 2. So we're not, easing everybody else in. We got, the players that we want. It's time to let them go cook. Just let them go cook and play.
Well, to interrupt our sentiment here, Quano probably won't be back with us because I got a DM saying that they lost power, so he has no
Oh
Wi-Fi right
no.
now.
Oh no. All right. Well,
Um,
then what I was going to do, Joe, I'm going to share my screen real quickly here because I want to see if you know who, let me see if I can find it here.
oh God, you're gonna ask me a question about who is this fit, and I'm gonna
Am I
not
doing it?
know anything.
Yeah. Let's see. Here it is. Perfect. All right. Okay. Do you know who that is?
Let me do this real quick.
If I'm sharing the right screen, it should be 2 guys standing next to each other.
Yeah, number 4 and a 41.
Yes,
Is that from Penn State? Is that Kobe King?
it is. And you know who Kobe King is, correct?
I watched some of them. Yeah.
He
Is that
is.
shit, the King that we just drafted last year's brother?
Yes, it is Kalen King's brother. They are said to be twins,
Oh,
actually.
really?
So I don't know where he projects as far as yeah, that's in, I share that just for fun because Kalen King was on the practice squad, so he's not
Yep.
necessarily
Yep.
a face that a lot of fans are going to recognize right away. But this was one that was interesting to me too because Penn State is not a slouchy program, right? So what do they think of the way that he played? Now the question is, would the Packers consider a brothers combination? I mean, they passed on Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if it was because they had EQ, but we all know which receiver, which brother is doing better in the league right now. So,
Yeah.
the question
I
is are the Packers just opposed to there being family members on their team?
I don't think so. I just don't think it's fallen in any way for them to swoop in and do it. I do know that when Aaron Jones was still on the team, they did bring his brother in, Alvin Jr. for a workout a couple of different times.
Okay.
So I don't think they're completely opposed to it, but I don't think they're just going to go out there and do it. And I'm not saying this is what you're saying. I don't think they're going to go out there and do it just to do it and say, "Oh yeah, this is his brother, so we want to
Yeah.
bring him in, brother." I
Yep.
think it's going to do a lot of if it fits what they need. So if they really think this guy is going to be, you put them over the top, then I think they'll do it. That's like a lot of these. I call them legacies because they're related to somebody who played on the Packers, whatever. Like Christian Watson is a legacy, and you know, Pete Skoronsky and the other kid that the Chargers drafted, Adderley. Uh, what was his first name? Nasir.
Yep.
You know, that's the same thing. I You don't see them take that too often. Well, I don't
Yep.
think it's because they're afraid to take it. I just don't think it's fitting to what they need at that time to
Sure.
take it.
Sure.
So while I would not be opposed to it, I think it's just going to come down to, all right, well, we've already taken a linebacker in the draft. Do we, just double down and take this guy and, see what he does, take a flyer on him or whatever? Well, he's this guy's brother. Do we ask him, are they going to get along while they're here? That kind of thing. I just think that if, okay, well, we haven't taken anybody, this kid's on the board, he could be a fly for we take a flyer on him and he could be something special, then I think they could go for it.
Sure.
The softer side of me says I have no problems with it. I'd love to see it because I always think it's great when, they grew up together playing sports together. They went to the same college playing sports together. It would be great to see them play together in the pros at some point too. But, it's just whether or not the Packers can justify it with keeping, saying, all right, this is what we need at this time.
Yeah.
I did watch Kobe, and I think he's a decent late rounder, but I don't know what he measured at the combine, but just off my notes, I thought he looked stiff in coverage, and I think he was more quick than fast, but I did say he was like a tackling machine. I do think he could probably be that Isaiah McDuffie replacement. And so like I said, if they think that they can do something with him, I say go for it.
Yeah. And turn back the clock a couple of years if you want to and get a McDuffie, but a little bit younger. Sure.
Right.
If
Right.
that, there's a bunch of guys that are out there too. A couple we did mention, like Cody Simon out of Ohio State. I know Ohio State's going to
Yeah.
garner a lot of attention. They just won a national championship. Barrett Carter out of Clemson. Just some of those guys too, I think are going to get looks because of the level of competition they played against, the school that they played at. This is just going back to the very beginning of this conversation, which is how do you think the Packers are going to attack this position group? I think if they saw this as a need, and this is one of the first years that I can think of where I guess when they drafted Quay Walker, they didn't really think inside linebacker was a huge need because they had a first round pick there and they were going to give him time to develop. But with Edge Cooper and Quay, a healthy Quay Walker to start, this is kind of the first time that this position group seems in pretty good shape, to start off the season. If they're both healthy, Quay can come out and play well. I mean, the best case scenario, because they used a first round pick on him 4 years ago now, is that he plays himself into an extension. The Packers end up
Right.
extending him because obviously you want to be giving a second contract out to a first round pick. You don't want to be letting them go after their first contract ends. But they have other things that they might need to look at and work on this year. But I think all the signs and other discussion that we're talking to is only like more reaffirmed in my mind that I think this is a day 3 type of situation where the Packers will address it in day 3 to fortify it. Because if they want to, they can go the safe route and probably get McDuffie and Eric Wilson to come back on pretty good contracts, unless somebody saw a huge value in Wilson and they want to throw some money at him, and then he ends up going somewhere else. I could see that happening. We've got teams in our division that love to pluck our hidden gems because that's just what they do. So this is going to be a fun one to watch. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, are you going to the draft? I haven't had a chance to
Yes.
talk to you guys, so you'll be there.
We'll be there. I've already set my dates. I've sent them in. I had to find a place in Neenah because that was the cheapest and closest I could get. And I mean, I could go stay with family if I wanted to, but it would still be like a 45-minute or so drive. So, but and like I tell people, it used to be fun when I would go stay with my grandpa and drive the hour and that back and forth. But now that I'm getting a little bit older and all that, I don't want to have that person worrying because I'm not in the house at this certain time, so it's just a lot easier to, get someplace and whatever. But I will be there January, April 23rd, and I will be leaving the last day of the draft, so the 26th. And unless I decide to sleep in my car that night and leave the next morning or whatever.
Very good. Well, I will. I guess now that I might have to save up some extra money to buy my Packers tickets at Lambeau Field, since there won't be as many fans selling their tickets, I will not be at the draft in person this year. I will be watching from the confines of sunny Phoenix and hoping that the Packers have a very, very solid draft. And I, for one, am fine if they trade that first rounder for whatever they do. If they have a first round pick or not, I have a feeling that they will. I don't think that they'll trade a first round pick, but
I know Goody said that having the draft in Green Bay has
it's
no
not. Yeah.
plays in no decision, but I think in the back of his mind, he thinks that it will play a little bit of a decision that he's not going to sell it cheaply. I'm not saying he won't sell it at all. I'm just saying I don't think he's going to sell it cheaply, knowing the kind of reaction the rabid Packer fans would have for being there all damn day and doing all the stuff in Green Bay and then not having somebody's name called. The rumor is, and I don't know if I'm the one that started this rumor or if it's actually a rumor going around, because a couple weeks ago we had Dan Kotnick on, and Dan and I were talking about the draft, and I said one of two things needs to happen for the first round. You know how they always have the first rounders walk up on the stage, do the hug with Goodell and all that good stuff. One of two things need to happen. Either the draft pick needs to ride down the snow tube, the Aaron snow tube, or they need to ride the bike up to the stage.
Oh, hell yes.
Ever since
Abs-
I've said that, I've had two other people tell me they've heard rumors that it's happening. So I don't know if I'm the one that started the rumor or if there's actually rumors floating around that they will be riding bikes. Now, Jake last week did say that the new draft caps have pins, and one of the pins is a bicycle.
Okay.
So I don't know if that is leading up to them actually doing it, but and that's where I said I think it's got to be in the back of Goody's mind that if they do the tradition with the bike ride up to the stage, and he trades that first round pick, and they don't have a pick to go ride that bike up to stage, I think there'll be a riot in Green Bay.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I just hope the city does a really good job of portraying itself, and I think they will. I think Green Bay is going to do a great job. It's not a huge locale. I mean, I'll be honest with you too. Crowds are just it's enough to go to a marquee game in Green Bay and be there
Yeah.
on like pick like a primetime game, for example. I've been to Sunday night, Monday night football games where it's like just getting around town and just bars and restaurants and everything like that. The draft, like I probably, if it was me, if I was going, and I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating because this is just me, but I'd probably just stay in Milwaukee and drive. I mean, I would just,
Yeah.
which I know sounds crazy because it's like, well, especially if you're going to go to multiple days, like you're going to go back and forth, but it's just like, man, between like the cost to stay up there, and you've got to have a hookup of some sort, family, like you said, or be willing to stay out. And I mean, Nina to me is still a huge win. I mean, that's not that
Yeah.
far, so
No, it's about a half hour.
that'll be a lot of fun. I'll be really excited to hear your recap on that. And I don't know if you guys are planning on doing a live show or any kind of shows from the draft or anything like that, but
The
it's
last
going to be cool.
time we talked about it, Mike is not going to the draft unless things have changed. So he probably will be leading our day two like normal.
I was going to say, so it's all on you, Joe. You're
Yeah.
waving the flag of OPE all by yourself. So hopefully you've got a good microphone and you get your good running shoes on so you can catch everybody and grab them for a couple minutes
Well,
for
now
your.
I'm going to correct you on that. I'm not going to be the only one because our other podcaster of the Cheese Talk podcast, Brian Rego, lives in De Pere, and
Ah,
he's supposed to be going every day to the draft with me. So
okay.
we'll
Oh,
be up
good.
there repping. But all right, so I got a final couple questions before we let you go and get back to your actual life and not talking to us over here. The first one I've been asking of everybody lately: what is one guy that you've sat down and watched or you heard or whatever from the linebacker core, out of the linebacker draft picks that you wouldn't touch with like a 10-foot pole?
Um,
If the Packers drafted him, you'd be like, oh God, that guy's not going to do anything.
Well, I have a couple reasons. Okay, I have one. I'll give you a couple reasons why. It is, I hope I say this right, Jamin Dumas Johnson out of Kentucky.
Okay, yeah, the kid from Kentucky. Yep.
He started out of Georgia. He was a productive. He was productive. I think he projects as a day 3 special teamer, and I feel like they just drafted Tyron Hopper last year,
Yep.
so he's redundant, and he had a. These things kind of resonate with me a little bit, just because I do think there's something to be said about making good decisions. He did have that reckless driving charge. I know a lot of these, some of these kids have stuff. They've got some off-field stuff that happened too. But
Yeah.
I looked at that and I thought to myself, it's like, things were going in a good direction. And when things are going well for you, to have the wherewithal to say, hey, let me just keep my head on straight, keep my head down, focus, like grind, do what I need to do. So I think it's the decision making, and then also just the fact that he's just redundant to me. It would really be, unless Brian Gutekunst said, I know he wants more draft picks. He said he wanted more draft picks. Unless he has 15 picks and he uses one of
Right.
15 picks on this kid, like, okay, then you could have me there a little bit too. But he transferred to Kentucky. He was at Georgia. Like, there's just some things there where I'm just like, you know what? I think the Packers can do better.
There's something about that Georgia team that they have all kinds of trouble when it comes to cars and shit like that.
Yeah.
So the
Yes.
one guy that I'm going to mention as a guy that I would avoid is probably going to draw me a lot of heat, especially from the DM group that I have over on Twitter with Brian Maffey and all them, is the kid from Notre Dame, Jack Kaiser. I was
Okay.
not impressed with him, and I know like the combine, the NFL page, and all that have him as like a higher ranked prospect, but I really he was a little light compared, and like we were talking about earlier, do the Packers change their thresholds on him or whatever? I said his speed looked okay. He was probably more quick than fast. His strength didn't look great. I had I had concerns about his vision, and this is why. There were a couple of games where I watched him. He was in middle linebacker position. He had the A gap wide open. The defensive tackle had center, and the end had guard. So the hole was wide open. If he would have just made a straight shot through the hole, he probably would have hit the ball carrier. But instead of going straight through the hole, he ran right in the back of his D tackle. And that happened on multiple occasions. And it's like, are you not seeing this gap?
Hmm.
And, if I'm the D tackle and I'm feeling my linebacker run right into my back on multiple occasions, me and that linebacker are going to have conversations.
Yeah. Well, do you think
So,
Quay Walker made that mistake too? There were a couple times where it just seemed like, and it's easy to assess things on film the way they look, but it just seemed like
right,
there were
right.
there were times where he could either, like, if no one else was on the field, it's like, run into this person. You have one job, like, run into each other, and somehow he would find a way to miss. Like, and
Yeah.
I don't, again, not a doctor. I don't know if it's a vision thing. I don't know if it's a mental, like, overthinking it thing, but it's almost like they have a guy like that in Quay Walker. And I don't know that you want to necessarily add a second, but I don't know what your take is on Quay and why he sometimes opted not to make the play that seemed to be right in front of him.
I think it's guessing. I
Fair.
think it's guessing more than anything. And that's something Quano and I have talked a lot about with Quay is instead of read and react, he's guessing at what's going to happen next. So I don't know if that's the whole part of having the green dot and knowing, everybody's assignment. And okay, well, if this guy's going to go over here and this is going to happen and this guy needs to be here, I don't know if he's over analyzing things because of that green dot. If you maybe take that green dot off of him and see him just focus on his one area, maybe that'll help him out a little bit. But I really think a lot of it, and there were a couple of guys that I watched that I said the same thing. They're just guessing at what they need to do. Instead of read and react, they're guessing, and most of the time they're missing on their guess. So I'm going to say it's more guessing than anything. And that could be what's going on with Kaiser too, is just guessing. But it just was really weird to me that everything's blocked off. You have a wide open gap, but instead of going through that wide open gap, you're running into your ass end of your D tackle. And it just, I was confused about it. And usually when that happened, either the running back was running right by him, the quarterback was completing the pass, whatever it was. And it was like, okay, well, I really, like you said, Quay kind of stumbles with that occasionally. We don't need something else like that. We need a guy who's going to read and react and not just guess at what he's doing out on the field.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that happen. Yeah. The other thing too is like the game happens fast. So it's like,
yeah,
that gap looks like it's open, but it could have just been something where that was a screen grab. And all of a sudden it was like, maybe his assignment was a little bit more of like a two gap type thing. But yeah, it's, those kind of things, the production on film and your actual ability to do the thing, that's what the combine is supposed to, I think, as Peter Bukowski said, is supposed to confirm what the tape already shows you in game action. So I think with that game action, you watch some of these tendencies, and if that's something that happens over and over again, you can't ignore it. You really can't. You can't ignore
right.
it. That's why I was hoping for a bigger sample size with Quay last year to see what's he really going to be in this new defense. And the other thing is too, if they do end up taking the green dot away, does that deflate his ego at all? I don't know what kind of ego we're talking about there. I know that Jair worked with him a little bit on his mental aptitude, and he definitely stayed more out of trouble. He wasn't in the middle of all these fracases last year, and so at least he fixed that within himself. But that's the other thing too, is mentally, does he feel like he's being demoted in a way if he has that green dot taken away? Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see.
It could possibly also be a relief to him because if you remember right, he didn't have the green dot when he was drafted anyway. It was going to be Devondre Campbell. He was forced to have the green dot because Campbell got injured for his extended, and so somebody had to take it over. So they gave it to Quay. So now, could that just be if they, you know, I know a lot of these guys where if they're forced to do something but they don't want to do it, they won't speak up and say, "Hey, I would rather not do that." They just live with it and go with the consequences. Could Quay be doing something like that where he doesn't want to feel like he's rocking the boat and saying, "Hey, I don't want to deal with the green dot. Can you give it to Jair? Can you give it to McKinney? Can you give it to McDuffie? Can you give it to one of these guys?" So maybe by taking it away, it would be a relief off his shoulders and he can go out and play a little bit more. But like we've been saying, we don't know what's going on through his head. We don't know what's going on at
Right.
practices. We don't know what's going on with that. So it could be a deflate, but it could also be a boost because they're saying, all right, we want you to be comfortable with this. So you go out and do what you need to do. We will give this to somebody else.
True. Yeah. Very true.
All right.
Very, very true.
My last question for you, and hopefully this won't be a take up too much more time because like I said, we want to get you out of here and get you going with what you got to do. I know it's what 7 o'clock your time right now, so got to get you over and get with the family and all that stuff. So the last question I got, Thursday, April 24th, 2025, Green Bay, Wisconsin. 23rd pick is on the board. They going through the war room. They have scouts talking everything. They have Goody talking with Matt LaFleur, talking with Jeff Halfley. This is Mark Murphy's last year there. They're talking to Mark Murphy. Hey, we don't know what we've got a handful of guys that we can take. We don't know what we want to do. One of the scouts from the West Coast speaks up and says, "Hey, I got a guy." Your phone rings saying, "Jason Perone, what do you think we're going to do at number 23? What would be your," and it could be anything. It could be just a position. It could be, if you got a specific player in mind, whatever. What are they doing at number 23?
It's going to be, I think it's going to be a defensive lineman.
You think so?
Yeah, I think it'll be defensive line. Yeah. Cause I think they will have already addressed corner in free agency in some way, shape or form. Receiver, they don't need to, unless there's somebody there that they're absolutely in love with. It screams big guy up front. I think it's going to be a defense. I think it'll be a defensive lineman, and probably one that can get after the quarterback a little bit too. But I think they go. I think they go with a big guy up front. I mean, they got pushed around too much last year on both sides, on the offensive line, and I know the Eagles are just really good up front. But if that's who the
Right.
Packers have to compete with, I mean, you kind of have to build yourself to beat the best of the best and beat the best opponent. They have to get bigger. And I don't think offensive line is as big of a need like that. They just took Jordan Morgan last year. So I think they'll go. I don't have a specific guy in mind because we don't know if they're going to stay there or not. But I would say it's going to be a defensive lineman in some way, shape, or form.
That's interesting. I've been keeping track, and like I said, I've been asking everybody every week and keeping track of this stuff. And my one thing that I've said that I would find the greatest thing in the world, it's been 23 years since the Packers took a wide receiver in the first round. The draft is in Green Bay. The rumors are they're doing the bicycles. The greatest thing that would ever happen would be if the Packers went wide receiver in the first round. That guy would be the instant king of Green Bay.
Yes.
They talk about A.J. Dillon being the mayor of Door County and all that good stuff. This guy would instantly become the king of Green Bay.
For
It
sure.
wouldn't matter if he drops 100% of his passes his first season, because it's been so long since they took him, because of the tradition that they're possibly going to be doing with the bike riding, because of it being in Green Bay and all that good stuff. I think it would be the greatest thing in the world for them to do. And the thing about it is, even though it's not as big as need, the Packers always tend to look ahead and plan ahead before it actually becomes a need on a lot of things. And with Romeo and Watson's contracts up, and the question marks behind those, there is a possibility, and there would be some guys sitting there at 23. So the thing that I would find the funniest in the world is if they went with wide receiver in the first round.
It would be, Goody says that the drafting in Green Bay doesn't play a factor, but it would be hard to knock that theory down if that's the direction that they ended up going. That would be huge.
Well, yeah, they'd give him the key to the whole city. I mean, that would just be amazing. All right, Jason, let's get you out of here. Why don't you tell the folks where they can find you and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm over on the PackADay podcast, the Thursday edition with Mark Eckel. So thanks everybody who listens to that already. Get over there and check us out. And of course, all the other days of the week too. Our teams do a fantastic job. And I am on both X. I'm at Jason Perone, and I'm also on Blue Sky Social. You can find me on either platform. So hit me up over there and let me know what you guys have going on and what's going on. The DMs are open. I'm always open to making new friends and meeting new people. And we did start, like I said, we did start talking a little bit of weather. So if you want some weather around the world, you might want to check in with the Thursday PackADay podcast to hear what's happening on the other side of the globe. But it's great to be back on, Joe. Thank you. And to Mike, who's not here in spirit, I thank him, you guys very much for having me back on. I look forward to it every year.
Well, and we try to work in some guys during the off season too, so we'll try to get you back on. And of course, like I said earlier, Mike is not going to the draft, so the plan is right now to have our day 2 live stream again with him running things, and maybe I can pop on being in the crowd and all that good stuff. So we'll see what happens there. But you can find us. I'm strictly on Blue Sky right now. You can still see me over at the Twitter or X or Elon Machine or whatever you want to call it. That's Iowa_Joe86. I'm not really active over there, but if you need to DM me for anything, you can hit me up on there. We do have a one for the show over there. It's at Ohana Packers. There is no Blue Sky for that one yet. My Blue Sky is Iowa Joe, and Mike, I think on both of his is Kawano Mike on both Twitter and Blue Sky. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and all those good things at Ohana Packers Edition. Make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Drop us some reviews. Let us know how we're doing, what you want to hear, guests you want us to have on. If you want Jason Perone back, I keep wanting to call you Peroni. It looks so Italian that I just want to say Perone.
Whoever, depending on who you ask in my family, you're right either way.
Oh, really?
Yes.
But if you want Jason to come back, hell, if you want Jason to replace Mike, make sure you put that in the comments or something. We're always looking for new guys on the show. But yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, drop us some reviews. If you want to get a hold of us, DM us or send an email to outbackpackers1919@gmail.com. Next week, I have no clue what we're doing. I don't even remember off the top of my head, but we're going to continue our pre-draft, and I'm not sure who we got coming on. Man, you can tell my Alzheimer's is kicking in highly because I'm having a hard time. Everything's running together. But as Mike would say, go back, go, and aloha.
Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for the up. Let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know who wanna go.